Coming back from the pharmacy, I found the locks changed and my toolbox, my father's toolbox, sitting in the mud. Taped to the front door was a note. Mom, the basement suite is ready. Use the side door. We need privacy for the open house prep. I stared at the rain slicking the red metal of the toolbox. I was the one paying for the remodel. Check. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I stood there in the driveway, the engine of my 2014 Ford F-150 ticking as it cooled, staring at that note. The ink was running slightly in the drizzle, smearing the sharp, impatient handwriting of my daughter-in-law, Jessica. I'm 72 years old. I've restored houses from the foundation up. I've framed roofs in snowstorms and laid hardwood floors until my knees felt like they were filled with ground glass. But standing there, clutching a white paper bag of blood pressure medication, I felt a weakness in my legs that had nothing to do with age. I walked up the porch steps I had resanded and stained by hand just last spring, and tried my key. It slid in but it wouldn't turn. They hadn't just locked me out. They had rekeyed the deadbolt. I looked down at the toolbox in the mud. It wasn't just a box. It was a vintage Craftsman heavy-gauge steel, passed down from my father to me. It held the chisels I'd used to carve the mantel inside, the hammer I'd used to build the crib for my son, David. To see it sitting there, exposed to the elements like trash, broke something inside me. I didn't go to the side door. I didn't go to the basement suite, which I knew was a damp, unfinished storage room with a concrete floor and a single hopper window. Instead, I picked up the toolbox, ignoring the protest in my lower back, and walked back to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat, the rain drumming a rhythm on the roof, and looked at the house. It was a Craftsman bungalow in Seattle, bought 40 years ago with my late husband Robert. We'd scraped together every penny for the down payment. When Robert got sick 3 years ago, David and Jessica moved in to help. After Robert passed, the dynamic shifted. It was subtle at first. A suggestion to repaint the kitchen. Then the removal of my recliner because it clashed with the aesthetic. Then the pressure to sign the deed over to them for estate planning purposes, and to help them secure a loan for their startup business. I had done it. I signed the paper. But I had kept one secret. A secret that was currently sitting in a fireproof box at the First National Bank downtown. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Mom saw your truck. Don't come in the front. Jessica has a stager coming for the photos. The basement is set up for you. We put your cot down there. Be quiet, please. Be quiet, please. I thought about the nights I stayed up holding David when he had fevers. I thought about the extra shifts I worked at the hardware store to pay for his useless business degree. I thought about the mortgage payments I was still secretly covering because their startup wasn't starting up fast enough. I didn't text back. I put the truck in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I drove straight to the bank. Mrs. Miller, good to see you. The teller, Sarah, smiled. She'd known me and Robert for decades. How are you holding up? I've been better, Sarah, I said, my voice raspy. I need to speak to Mr. Henderson. And I need to stop an automatic transfer. Is everything okay? No, I said, leaning on the counter, feeling the weight of the last 3 years crushing down on me. I think I've just been evicted. I checked into the Motel 6 off the highway. It smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. But it had a bed, a locking door, and a TV that I could control. I sat on the edge of the bed and called my old friend, Frank. Frank was a retired union rep, a man who could argue with a brick wall and win. Audrey. Frank answered on the second ring. You sound like you swallowed a handful of sawdust. What's wrong? They put me in the basement, Frank. Or they tried to. Locked me out of the main house. Left my dad's tools in the mud. There was a silence on the line, heavy and dangerous. David did that? Jessica directed it. David went along with it. They're staging the house. They're selling it, Frank. But you still pay the mortgage, Frank said. And the utilities. And the property tax. I do. And you signed the deed over? I did. Audrey, you stubborn old mule. I told you not to do that. I know, I whispered, rubbing my temples. I just wanted to help. Robert. He made me promise to look after him. Looking after him doesn't mean letting him bleed you dry and treat you like a stray dog, Frank growled. Where are you? Motel 6. I'm coming over. And I'm bringing my daughter. You remember Chloe? The little girl with the pigtails? She's 34 and a shark of a real estate attorney now. Get your paperwork together, Audrey. We're going to war. That night, under the flickering fluorescent light of the motel room, I laid it all out for Chloe. The bank statement showing the $2,400 a month I was transferring to David's account for the mortgage. The receipts for the new roof I paid for last year, $18,000. The bills for the electricity, the water, the gas. Chloe, a sharp woman with eyes that didn't miss a thing, sifted through the papers. You signed a quitclaim deed, she said, looking at a copy I had in my files. This transferred ownership to David and Jessica. My heart sank. So I have no leg to stand on. Hold on, she held up a hand. You said you had a secret? I nodded. I reached into the heavy envelope I'd brought from the safety deposit box. I pulled out a document, yellowed slightly at the edges. When we did the transfer, I said, I didn't use their lawyer like they wanted. I used Old Man Jenkins before he retired. He insisted on this. I slid the paper across the cheap laminate table. Chloe read it, and a slow, predatory smile spread across her face. A life estate, she said softly, with a twist. Jenkins said it meant I had the right to live there until I died, I said. I didn't tell David. I didn't want him to feel like I didn't trust him. But Jenkins, he wouldn't file the deed without it. It's better than that, Chloe said, tapping the paper. This specific rider says that you retain exclusive possession and control of the property during your lifetime. And this is the kicker. Any sale or transfer of the property requires your written consent. Furthermore, it states that if the remainder men, that's David and Jessica, fail to pay the insurance or taxes, the life estate reverts to full ownership. I've been paying the taxes, I said. Directly. Yes. I didn't trust them to do it. Chloe laughed, a sound of pure triumph. Mrs. Miller, they can't sell that house. They can't even legally change the locks on you. In the eyes of the law, you are the landlord, and they are the guests. And by locking you out, that's an illegal eviction. So what do I do? First, Chloe said, you stop paying everything. The mortgage transfer, the lights, the water. Cut it all. David will miss the payment. His credit is not your problem, Frank interjected. He put your tools in the mud, Audrey. He put you in a basement. Second, Chloe continued, we file a temporary restraining order preventing them from selling or altering the property. And third, we pay them a visit. I stayed at the motel for 3 days. It was the hardest 3 days of my life. My phone blew up. 14 missed calls from David. 8 missed calls from Jessica. Text, Mom, the power is out. Did you forget the bill? Text, Mom, the mortgage transfer didn't hit. We're overdrawn. What is going on? Text, Dad would be ashamed of you. That last one sent by Jessica almost made me cave. Almost. But then I remembered the rain on the toolbox. I remembered the basement suite with the concrete floor. I remembered the way they'd thrown away Robert's rose bushes to put in a Zen garden of rocks. I didn't answer. I ate diner food with Frank, watched old westerns, and waited for Chloe to give the green light. On the 4th day, we rolled up to the house. There was a for sale sign in the yard. Coming soon. Luxury craftsman remodel. Luxury. That meant my sweat, my money, my life. I parked my truck right behind David's leased BMW. Frank parked his sedan behind Jessica's Range Rover, blocking them both in. We walked up the steps. I used my key. It still didn't work, of course. I rang the bell. Jessica answered. She was wearing yoga pants and holding a green smoothie. Her eyes went wide when she saw me, flanked by Frank and Chloe in a sharp suit. Mom. I mean Audrey, she stammered. Where have you been? We've been worried sick. And why is the power off? Move aside, Jessica, I said, my voice calm. You can't just barge in here. We have a realtor coming in an hour. Actually, Chloe stepped forward, handing Jessica a thick envelope. She can. This is a court order enforcing Mrs. Miller's life estate. And this is a notice of intent to sue for illegal eviction and elder abuse. Jessica's face went pale. Elder abuse? We gave her the suite. You put her in a storage room and changed the locks on a home she has legal possession of. Chloe said. Is David home? I'm here. David appeared in the hallway. He looked tired. He hadn't shaved. Mom, what the hell is this? The bank is calling me 5 times a day. The mortgage bounced. We have late fees. Hello, son, I said. I walked past them into the living room. It was unrecognizable. My furniture was gone. The walls were painted a sterile, hospital white. They had staged it with fake furniture, cardboard boxes covered in fabric to look like beds and sofas. It looked like a hotel lobby, not a home. Where is my chair? I asked. We put it in storage, David said, his voice rising. Mom, stop acting crazy. We need that money transfer. We're closing on the new condo downtown in 2 weeks. We need to sell this place to pay for it. You're not selling this house, I said. It's my house. David shouted. You signed it over. Read the paperwork, David, I said, sitting down on one of the fake staging chairs. Crumpled slightly under my weight, but I didn't care. I retained a life estate. You own the house after I die. Until then it's mine. And you can't sell it without my signature. David looked at the papers Chloe had handed Jessica. He scanned them, his hands shaking. No, he whispered. No, that's not what you said. You said it was ours. I said I wanted you to have it eventually, I corrected. I didn't say you could throw me in the damp basement like an old broom while you cashed in on my life's work. We were going to take care of you. Jessica shrieked. The condo has a guest room. A guest room. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Like the garage suite? Like the basement? I heard you talking 3 weeks ago, Jessica. I heard you tell your friend on the phone that you were going to put me in assisted living the moment the check cleared because I smelled like sawdust and mothballs. Jessica's mouth snapped shut. I'm not going anywhere, I said. And since you've failed to pay the utilities and the insurance, which I have proof of, I am petitioning to revoke the deed entirely based on the clause in the agreement. You can't do that, David said, tears forming in his eyes. Mom, please. We're leveraged up to our eyeballs. If we don't sell this house, we lose the deposit on the condo. We lose the business loan. You should have thought about that before you put my tools in the mud, I said. The silence that followed was heavy. Here is the deal, Chloe spoke up. Mrs. Miller is generous. She is willing to buy you out. Buy us out. David looked hopeful. For market value? No, Chloe smiled. For the value of the equity you have actually contributed, which, looking at the records, is 0. You haven't paid a dime of principal. However, Mrs. Miller is willing to give you $10,000 to cover moving expenses. In exchange, you sign a quitclaim deed back to her today, ending this charade. $10,000? Jessica scoffed. This house is worth $900,000. It's worth nothing to you if you can't sell it, Frank pointed out. And with the elder abuse lawsuit we're prepared to file, you'll be spending that $10,000 on criminal defense lawyers. David looked at me. He looked at the mother who had taught him to ride a bike, who had paid for his wedding, who had grieved with him when his father died. Mom, he pleaded. We're family. I know, I said, and my voice broke. That's why this hurts so much. But I'm done, David. I'm done being the bank. I'm done being invisible. I want my home back. I stood up. You have 24 hours to decide. If you're not out by tomorrow at noon, the sheriff comes to execute the eviction for the main dwelling. I walked out. I didn't look back. I spent one more night at the Motel 6. I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was being too hard, wondering if Robert would be angry with me. But then I thought about the disrespect. Not just to me but to the house. To the memories. The next day at 11 a.m., Chloe called. They signed. I drove back to the house. The BMW and the Range Rover were gone. The for sale sign had been pulled up and thrown in the bushes. I walked inside. It was empty. They had taken the staging furniture, the fake plants, everything. They had even taken the light bulbs from the hallway, a final act of petty spite. I walked through the echoing rooms. It felt cold, felt sterile, but it was mine. I went out to the backyard. My toolbox was still there where I'd left it, though someone had moved it under the awning. I opened it. The tools were a bit spotted with rust, but nothing I couldn't clean with some oil and steel wool. I spent the next month reclaiming my life. I painted the kitchen back to a warm yellow, the color Robert loved. I bought a new recliner, leather, comfortable, ugly as sin. I brought my books out of the damp basement. I had to dip into my retirement savings to fix the mess they'd made of the finances. But without the $2,400 drain every month, I was stabilizing. I got a dog, a golden retriever mix named Buster from the shelter. He didn't care about aesthetics. He just wanted to sleep on my feet while I watched the game. 6 months passed. I hadn't heard a word from David. I knew through the grapevine, Martha at the grocery store, that they were living in a rental apartment on the other side of town, that Jessica had to go back to work as a receptionist, and that their startup had folded. It was a Tuesday in October when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a rag. I had been oiling the deck and went to the door. It was David. He looked thinner. He wasn't wearing the expensive suits he used to favor. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He looked like he did when he was 20. "Hi, Mom," he said, standing on the other side of the screen door. "David," I nodded. "I didn't open the door yet. I brought you this." He held up a small paper bag. "It's a new set of drill bits. I noticed yours were getting dull when before." I looked at the bag. "You drove all the way here to bring me drill bits?" He looked down at his boots. "I drove here to say I'm sorry. Jessica left me, Mom." I wasn't surprised. "I'm sorry to hear that. She blamed me for losing the house. Said I should have fought harder." He let out a bitter laugh. "I realized. I shouldn't have been fighting you at all. You were the only one in my corner." I looked at my son. I saw the remorse in his eyes. It was real. He had hit rock bottom, and unlike before, I hadn't been there to cushion the fall. He had to feel the impact to understand. "I treated you like an ATM," he said, his voice thick. "I forgot that you're the reason I even had a roof over my head. I'm so sorry." I stood there for a long moment. Part of me wanted to keep the door locked, to protect my peace, to never risk that betrayal again. But then I looked at the porch railing, the one David had helped me install when he was 16. He had held the level while I hammered. We had built this house together, in a way. "The drill bits," I said. "Are they titanium or that cheap black oxide stuff?" David looked up, a flicker of a smile crossing his face. "Titanium. Milwaukee brand. The good stuff." I unlocked the screen door and pushed it open. "Well," I said, stepping back. "Come in. Coffee's on. But don't think this means you're moving back in." "I know," David said, stepping over the threshold. "I have a studio apartment. I wanted to see you." We sat in the kitchen, the yellow kitchen, and drank coffee. We didn't talk about the lawsuit. We didn't talk about Jessica. We talked about the Mariners. We talked about the leak in the gutter. It wasn't the same as before. The trust had a crack in it like a piece of wood with a knot. It would never be quite as strong as it was. But with enough glue and enough time, it could hold weight again. "I'm Audrey Wilson. And I learned that you can love your children without setting yourself on fire to keep them warm." I looked out the window at my backyard. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds, hitting the wet grass. I was alone in my house, but for the first time in 3 years I wasn't lonely. I had my dignity. I had my home. And I had my tools. I picked up my mug and toasted the empty room. "Here's to the good wood," I whispered. "And weeding out the rot." Coming back from the hospital, I found my bags on the sidewalk with a note. "If you want to stay here." That was the moment everything changed. If you've ever felt like you were giving too much to people who didn't appreciate it, leave a yes in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice. Until next time.